We have a couple documents we're going to look at today on the channel. And I did see a bunch of super chats, and I will read the super chats in a second. Thank you guys for that. I just want to tell you what we're doing on the show today, okay? And then we're going to get into it. We have a couple documents that we're going to be reading on the channel today. Both of these documents come from a website called CrimeThink. CrimeThink, I'll show you the homepage actually. CrimeThink is the publishing arm of Antifa. It's not the only publishing arm. There are many. Antifa is a highly decentralized organization, but CrimeThink is one of the biggest and most well-known and most far-reaching publishing houses of Antifa. Okay? And so how Antifa works is Antifa is a highly decentralized organization where you have cells literally all over the country. It is completely flat. There is no hierarchy. There is no leadership. So how do you communicate and coordinate across a completely decentralized network in which there is no leadership? You do it through publishing stuff on anarchist websites that then get disseminated down into all of the different cells, and everyone reads it voluntarily. So if you want to know what is coming with Antifa, you read CrimeThink. CrimeThink will tell you what they're doing. CrimeThink will tell you what they're thinking. CrimeThink will tell you their strategy. These are documents that many, like a lot of people on the far left read, and this is what informs their behaviors, and this is what informs their perspective, okay? We're talking things like manifestos, communiques, after action reports. They do reports about, we went to this protest, or we did this direct action, and we did this thing. So CrimeThink is an excellent resource if you want to actually hinge into reality with primary source evidence about what the real far left is doing. So we're going to read 2 articles today on CrimeThink, and we're going to talk about them. The first article that we're going to read was literally just posted yesterday. It's called ICE Out of Illinois, ICE Out of Everywhere, a report from the blockades at the Broadview facility. So this is an article that Antifa has put together, basically saying, here is what we're doing at the ICE facility in Chicago, and here is what we have learned from the ICE facility in Chicago. So this is a direct report from Antifa, who are protesting in Chicago right now. So we're going to be starting today with an article from CrimeThink called ICE Out of Illinois, ICE Out of Everywhere, report from the blockade at the Broadview facility. The AI reader was reading earlier, so hopefully it does it again. Let's try.
ICE Out of Illinois.
Yeah.
ICE Out of Everywhere. A report from the blockades at the Broadview facility.
Awesome. Awesome. Let me put this link in the chat so you guys can follow along with the article. We are listening to an AI reader today, so you guys are just going to have to deal with it, because I don't want to read the whole thing. But we will listen to the article, and we will stop, and we will break stuff down and stuff like that. And well, you're still arguing in the chat, Elin, and I told you I'm not arguing with you about this anymore. Don't want to for some reason, for the same reasons. I don't even know what you're talking about, but you're going to go in a little timeout for 5 minutes because I don't want this argument to continue. We are reading an article now. We are moving on. Okay. I think I may have gotten some super chats. Hang on. There we go, Andre. Some people don't understand they need to stop choosing to believe lies and liars. Say no to lies. Yeah. I mean, listen, man. And this is something I've seen on the conservative right for a long time. Conservatives love their influencers. They love their influencers on a personal level. They don't want to believe that their lying influencers are lying to them. It creates a lot of cognitive dissonance. And so every time I prove that one of these conservatives is listening to people who lie to them, just with the evidence, the response I get is, but I really like him. Well, you're allowed to really like him. I guess you're allowed to really like being lied to. But if you want to know why you don't understand the left, if you want to know why you're completely unhinged from reality, it's because you're listening to someone who lies to you. I'm sorry. I don't make the rules. I don't make the evidence. I just show it to you on the internet. That's it. Anyway, let's dig into this article. Let's see what they're doing in Illinois.
A report from the blockades at the Broadview facility. ICE Out of Illinois. ICE Out of Everywhere. A report from the blockades at the Broadview facility. Following messy efforts to crack down on immigrants in Los Angeles, the Trump administration announced that Chicago will be the next target of concentrated attacks from United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The so-called Blitz is already meeting resistance. In June 2025, thousands of people in Chicago took to the streets in solidarity with the resistance in Los Angeles. At the same time, demonstrators from Seattle to Chicago experimented with blocking ICE agents when they showed up to kidnap people at court appearances. Now, people in Chicago area are seeking.
Oh, shit. I want to note something about this. For people who are new, so how the left frames what ICE is doing to its people, and I've heard them do this in meetings, they're telling people that ICE is kidnapping people. You can see it here. And when they're telling people ICE is kidnapping people, they basically so at the New York Anarchist Book Fair, I went undercover with an anti-ICE group where they were training us on how to identify ICE. They trained us how to slash ICE's tires and stuff like that. And so this is the language that they use. They said ICE is coming into our communities and kidnapping people, and we have to prevent people from being kidnapped. So you have to understand that from the leftist perspective, from the far left perspective, they're literally preventing people from being kidnapped and saving their life. Now, of course, that's absurd and stupid. I'm not suggesting I agree with them, but I'm explaining to you the mentality of the leftists. They believe that they are the do-gooders in this situation, and that's why they're willing to do this. That's why they're willing to put their bodies in front of ICE vehicles. That's why they're willing to commit crimes. They literally believe that they are preventing their neighbors from being kidnapped, okay? This is what I mean when I say Antifa is a cult. The left is a cult. They only ever listen to and talk to other leftists, so they are in a complete echo chamber where they're only getting this perspective reinforced, and that's why they believe that they are literally protecting people from being kidnapped.
Now, people in Chicago, demonstrators from Seattle to Chicago experimented with blocking ICE agents when they showed up to kidnap people at court appearances. Now, people in Chicago area are seeking to take strategic action at bottlenecks in ICE operations. In this report, participants in the blockades targeting an ICE facility near Chicago recount their experiences and share their preliminary conclusions. In the early hours of September 19th, people congregated outside of the ICE processing facility in Broadview, Illinois, a suburb west of Chicago, gathering far earlier than the publicly announced mobilizations set for 7 a.m. and later for the evening. We hope to catch federal agents in the act of transporting kidnappees from around the Midwest.
Again, we hope to catch federal agents in the process of kidnapping, of transporting kidnappees around the Midwest. This is Antifa writing this.
The processing center in Broadview holds roughly 150 prisoners at any given time. It serves as a hub for ICE activity across the Midwest. Higher capacity ICE detention centers are illegal in Illinois, making the location a logistical choke point in the transportation of prisoners. As federal resources for this center have ballooned to satisfy far-right politicians' desire for xenophobic violence, the Broadview location has become increasingly important as a critical piece of infrastructure. When protest activity at Broadview began, small groups initially tended towards self-sacrificial, spectacular acts, typically sitting down in front of IC vans leaving the processing center, only to be dragged away by the Broadview Police Department.
Oh, I was muted. Hang on, got a question here from Arthur. Why do you think the kid shot detainees? Well, it is true that the far left is arming themselves. It is true that there are far left gun clubs, like the Socialist Rifle Association and the John Brown Gun Club. However, that's not to say that every moron in Antifa with a gun knows how to use the gun. That's not to say that every idiot with a gun actually goes to the range to train with the gun and learns how to shoot the gun before they go and shoot up the ICE facility. So you got to remember, listen, you can already tell by this document, Antifa's not dumb. They're highly strategic about what they're doing. And by the way, they've been talking like this since January. I've been documenting Antifa's plans around ICE facilities since January, long before most people were talking about it, because they've literally been talking about attacking ICE facilities since January, okay? Antifa's not dumb. They think about logistics. They think about choke points in ICE facilities. They think about where they're going to attack ICE vans. They're highly strategic. But that's not to say that everyone in Antifa is, smart or thinks things through. There is absolutely mental illness within Antifa, and although I would not make the argument that all Antifa is mentally ill, I actually think that's an incredibly dangerous argument to make. I think we can make the argument that if someone is bringing a gun from the Russian Revolution, because that gun was like literally the same gun they used in the Russian Revolution. If someone is bringing a gun to an ICE facility, an old gun that is from the Russian Revolution, I think we might be able to assess that that person might be mentally ill. Well, you don't get to disagree with me, bro. You're in my fucking classroom. I'm telling you the answer, and I promise you, you don't have more information than I do. So if you want to make an argument, go ahead and make the argument, and I will tell you why you're wrong. But as a reminder, guys, you're in my classroom right now. I'm not in yours. This is not a conversation. You're asking me a question. I'm giving you an answer. I expect you to actually listen to the answer I'm giving you, because I'm taking time out of the stream to answer your question out of the goodness of my heart. You didn't even send in a super chat. So before I even finish my answer, you're telling me how you disagree. So I'm not going to answer the rest of your question. If you have a counter argument that you would like to present, please go ahead and present it. But my guess is, Arthur, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, and you didn't even listen to the answer that I gave you, which tells me not to waste any more time on you. Shelly, and with the super chat in Antifa literature, is there any shade of meaning between far right, fascist, and Nazi? Oh, no. No, Antifa thinks that anyone who is not a communist is a far right, fascist, Nazi, whatever. So if you are to the right of Antifa, you are considered a fascist and a Nazi and far right and all that. So that's a great question. No, I'm not, but I appreciate the money. But no, I'm not, but I appreciate the money. Thank you. See, I mean, listen, you got to give Arthur credit. He followed the pay Karlyn money if she yells at me rule. I like that. I like that. I did see another super chat come in, I think. Hang on. Or did I? Yes. John, I work with an anarcho-commie and he literally believes ICE is committing genocide. Yes, they do. That's a great point. It is 1940s Germany. I'm in every commie's head right now. Yeah, that's actually true. And that's perpetual. That's a great observation, John. I appreciate it. All right, let's keep going.
When protest activity at Broadview began, small groups initially tended towards self-sacrificial, spectacular acts, typically sitting down in front of IC vans leaving the processing center, only to be dragged away by the Broadview Police Department. As reports and footage from each action spread.
Arthur, did I say anything about trans? Did I even say the word trans? I didn't say the word trans, bro. Listening comprehension's gotta do some work. Again, I appreciate the $10 super chat. I do. But I didn't say the word trans. I wasn't talking about trans people. There are a lot of people in Antifa who are not trans. If you think that everyone in Antifa is trans, you need to stop listening to whatever moron influencer told you that, because that's just not the truth. There are a lot of people in Antifa that are not trans at all in any way. No. The shooter wasn't trans. The Dallas ICE shooter wasn't trans. Anyway, we're moving on now, okay?
When protest activity at Broadview began, small groups initially tended towards self-sacrificial, spectacular acts, typically...
Hang on, we got another super chat coming in. Sorry, guys, we got to pause the article to do super chats. I mean, I appreciate the money. I do. Maybe if I keep getting so many super chats, I'll be like putting them in sections. I just put the link in the chat to the article again for people who just joined, so you can follow along. Andre said, doesn't Antifa believe even Democrats or capitalists are far right? Oh yeah, Antifa absolutely believes that Democrats are on the far right. So and this is why it's so stupid that Trump is tweeting that the Democrats are Antifa. Antifa believes the Democrats are far-right capitalist Nazis. Okay? It's absurd. Anyone that listens to Antifa knows damn well that Democrats are not Antifa and Antifa are not Democrats.
When protest activity at Broadview began, small groups initially tended towards self-sacrificial, spectacular acts, typically sitting down in front of IC vans leaving the processing center, only to be dragged away by the Broadview Police Department. As reports and footage from each action spread and faith in the effectiveness of nonviolent resistance waned, the mobilizations changed form. The primary objective of action shifted from sacrifice to resistance.
Yo, listen to this. As reports and footage from each action spread and faith in the effectiveness of nonviolent resistance waned, Antifa is telling us they don't have any faith that nonviolent resistance is going to be effective. You guys get that, right? They're saying faith in the effectiveness of nonviolent resistance waned. The mobilizations changed forms. The primary objective of action shifted from sacrifice means nonviolent resistance, to resistance. Resistance means aggressive direct action designed to provoke ICE. This is published on their website yesterday. This is a brand new document. Yep. Civility is capitalist. Exactly.
As reports and footage from each action spread and faith in the effectiveness of nonviolent resistance waned, the mobilizations changed form. The primary objective of action shifted from sacrifice to resistance. ICE began brutalizing and detaining protesters at will, and attempts to block the vans failed. In response, early morning crowds traded N95 masks for black block gear and opted to follow agents instead of just sitting down.
Okay, we'll look at that in a second. Alex, I'm very, very sorry. Only literal retards think that Democrats and media are useful idiots for Antifa. Only people who don't listen to the left think this. Only people who interact with conservative bullshit influencers think this. So thank you for the money, but your super chat is completely wrong. And I strongly advise you to stop listening to whatever retard influencers you're listening to and hinge back into reality with what the real far left thinks. But thanks for the money, bro. Appreciate it. ICE began brutalizing and detaining protesters at will. The minute that Antifa, you just got put in a timeout for the rest of the stream. Thank you. You don't tell me. Guys, okay, we have a lot of people here today. As a reminder, we have 2 rules in my chat. Number 1, don't be a dick. Number 2, no whining. Don't be a dick means you don't insult me, you don't insult other people in the chat. I can do whatever I want, Arthur, because you are in my house. You are in my classroom. You are in my private property. I can say and do whatever the fuck I want. And when people like you start whining and complaining because you're not getting the answers that you like, and you lash out exactly like this, that's when you go into a timeout because you are whining. And I don't want to hear your whining. I don't give a fuck about your feelings. Either you're here to learn or you can go. You can go avail yourself of everyone else teaching this stuff on the internet. Go find someone else. Oh, Arthur just got permanently banned. Oh no. Oh no. Arthur was going to go into a 24-hour timeout and now Arthur is permanently banned. Bye, Arthur. Bye. See ya. Anyway, back to this. ICE began brutalizing and detaining protesters at will. So what Antifa is doing here is Antifa is trying to present the image that it is ICE who is the aggressors. It is ICE who is doing the violence onto other people. And if ICE are the aggressors and ICE are inflicting violence onto other people, then that gives Antifa a complete open window to be violent in regards to ICE. Okay?
ICE began brutalizing and detaining protesters at will, and attempts to block the vans failed. In response, early morning crowds traded N95 masks for black block gear and opted to follow agents instead of just sitting down. Clearly, a more proactive approach was required. The efforts of Friday, September 19th, were the result. Friday morning. For over a decade, on Fridays at 7 a.m., Broadview has bused attendees to Indiana's Gary Chicago International Airport and more recently
Thanks,
to other
David.
detention centers in the Midwest. The facility responded to initial televised acts of civil disobedience by moving people out earlier and earlier. So we woke up earlier too. On September.
So I want you guys to pay attention to this. Again, this is why we never say Antifa is mentally ill. Antifa is literally staking out ICE facilities to find out what their schedule is and when they're moving people in and out of the ICE facilities so that they can literally plan their attacks on the ICE facilities when it's going to be more effective. See? I really do want you guys to learn, but you're not going to be a dick and you're not going to disrespect me when I do it. I work way too hard. I put myself through way too much nonsense. but there are people who appreciate my approach.
On September 19th, around 4:30 a.m., about 20 protesters gathered by the facility. Some were dressed in black bloc, some in normal street clothes. In contrast to the previous week's self-sacrificial civil disobedience, most people, with the exception of an aspiring congresswoman and her press crew, decided only to stand in front of a vehicle when it was entering or leaving. This shift enabled the small crowd to move like water. An IC agent on his way to work hurries away from protesters during the early hours of the morning. The first van that tried to leave.
I want to mention this because it's kind of relevant to this. I'm not ready to talk about this yet, but earlier today I found a YouTube channel, or I should say I didn't find it. A member of my community found it, and I was very grateful to that person for tipping me off to it. There is a YouTube channel that is streaming from Antifa's perspective all of their protests and demonstrations outside of these ICE facilities. And they just sit there and stream as Antifa yells at ICE officers. And you can see multiple streams. Like this morning, it was streaming from Chicago and from Los Angeles. And it was showing you what happened in Chicago and Los Angeles, just like, again, from the perspective of the people who are actually protesting outside of the ICE facilities. And one of the things that Antifa is doing in Chicago specifically is Antifa is trying, and I saw this on the stream, Antifa is trying to position their cameras so that they're seeing the license plates of the cars going in and out of the ICE facilities. So what they're trying to do is basically figure out who's in the cars and dox those people on the internet to other people in Antifa. I'm not ready to show you guys this yet because this YouTube channel has months of protest footage. They have months of this stuff. And so I literally just found it. I haven't had the chance to dig into it yet, but I will show it to you at some point because it's like there, and we'll probably end up watching it on the channel at some point. It is literally just like you can see exactly what Antifa's doing from their perspective on the ground. And Chicago is one of the facilities they're doing it out of. I just looked at the Crime Think website. I never knew how organized Antifa were. Breaking this up would be a hard task. It goes deep. Yeah. And the stuff on that Crime Think website goes back decades. It goes back decades. And you also have to remember, Crime Think is not the only website that does this. There are plenty of other Antifa websites. Crime Think is just the most reliable, and they tend to update the most often, and they're like the most prolific. Crime Think was literally at the anarchist book fair that I went undercover at in New York like a week and a half ago. So they're everywhere. They're distributing these documents all over the country. So it's just one of the best sources, but it's by no means the only source. And this is why I tell people it's so important to actually hinge into reality with the real far left, because once you actually look at what they're doing, it's like it becomes undeniable how organized and cohesive these people are. And again, guys, I will put the link to the article we're reading in the chat, and you can just go to the website from there if you want to check it out. We read articles from here on a pretty frequent basis. Got a Rumble rant from Lady over on Rumble. Do they teach their people to go out alone, or do they usually go out as a group? That's a great question. And actually, that was the one thing that was kind of confusing to me about this shooter at the ICE facility, because typically, almost always, Antifa will go out as a group because they're collectivists. They don't believe in individuality. They believe in doing things as a group. That the kid who shot up that ICE facility today probably had help. I have a hard time believing it was a lone gunman, because Antifa doesn't operate like that. Now, could it have been? I mean, sure, there's always the possibility of like a lone crazy person, right? But like, I have a really hard time believing that kid today that shot up the ICE facility in Dallas didn't have help of some sort. And maybe we'll find out more information about that. But that was a really great question. Keynes, let's see. Thank you for the super chat. Is this about the shooting in the Dallas ICE facility today? Appreciate your work and love your chat rules. Yeah, so we discussed the Dallas shooting earlier, but this document was actually published yesterday, so before the Dallas ICE shooting. And this is basically a report from Antifa on what they're doing in Chicago. So we're getting kind of like a boots on the ground perspective of like, here is what Antifa is seeing and doing in Chicago right now as of yesterday. Appreciate the super chat.
The first van that tried to leave Broadview was turned back as most of the crowd surrounded it and 3 people sat in the driveway. Energy was high, and those present followed any agent who left the gates closely, heckling the ones who pulled up to a nearby parking lot that holds marked IC vans, unmarked cars, and agents' personal vehicles. Caught off guard by the early risers, the agents were frantic, some sprinting from the parking lot to the gates of Broadview. In response to the heckling, they formed groups of 3 or more to walk to the facility. Some put on their gear before entering. This cowardice is worthy of note. A group of...
Hang on. There is no reality in which Antifa would pose as Democrats. You guys have got to understand, Antifa are a cult. This is their identity. They hate Democrats. There is no reality in which Antifa are going to pose as Democrats. That's what we call a conservative bullshit talking point. Yeah, they hated Kamala Harris because she was a cop. That's exactly right. They completely denounced Kamala Harris, even when she was vice president, because she's a cop and they don't like cops. Like one of the number one goals of Antifa is to abolish the prison industrial complex. And so, no, there's no reality they would do that. Did I see Tennessee State? No. What happened at Tennessee State University? What other nightmare is this? I don't know what you're talking about.
A group of mercenaries enters a detention center.
Mercenaries.
The enthusiasm of the early morning attendees set the tone for the rest of the day. As the sun began to rise, the agents inside the facility picked up where they had left off the previous week. Decked out in tactical gear.
Real? Harrison followed me on Twitter like yesterday. Harrison Smith aired a clip of mine on InfoWars. Yo! I made it on InfoWars? That's so cool. I made it on InfoWars in the final days of InfoWars. I made it before InfoWars totally goes down. Yeah! Awesome. Yeah, I know. I knew Harrison interviewed Nick. Isn't that funny? That's cool, man. If someone can find me like a time code for that clip, we'll totally watch it. Yeah, bro, just because you fled communism in 1991 does not mean that you know what communist activists are doing in the... Okay, Alex, you fled communism in 1991. You know everything about everything. What is the left's definition of capitalism? Go. You know everything about what communists in America are doing now. You're gonna teach us how much you know, Alex. This question is only for Alex. It's for no one else. This is a little game we do when someone comes in my chat and they act like they know more than me. Just because you fled from... My husband fled from communism as well, bro. Just because you fled from communism doesn't mean you know shit about shit. What is the left's definition of capitalism? We'll wait for your answer in the chat now. Go. Okay, guys, Antifa and Democrat hate each other. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, Alex, it's okay to say that you don't know the answer to the question, but we are going to wait for your answer to the question. What is the left's definition of capitalism? If you don't answer, Alex, you're going to get a timeout for the rest of the day in the chat. And the only reason you're getting a timeout for the rest of the day is you sent me money, to be really blunt. If you were just chatting in and I was yelling at you, you totally get banned. But, Alex, we are waiting. I'm not going to hold up the stream all day, Alex. You've got 30 more seconds to answer the question. What is the left's definition of capitalism? Go. You got 30 seconds. It's a really simple question. If you know anything about communism, you know the answer to this question. 15 seconds. We're waiting, Alex. What is the left's definition of capitalism? Yeah, he's calling a friend or he's doing AI. Yup, Google's not going to tell you this answer. 5, 4, 3. Well, you got one of those right. It's private property, but family is considered to be a form of private property. So the fact that you don't know that family is considered to be a form of private property tells me you don't actually know the answer in the first place. So nice try, but nope, you do not know what you're talking about the left. And so now we're going to ignore every single thing that you say. But thanks for the money, bro. Appreciate it. Back to this.
Decked out in tactical gear. Some gathered on the roof, some behind the front gate. Blocked by the crowd. ICE agents started driving.
Alex, you didn't answer it, bro. You didn't answer it. Private property and family is not the correct answer because the family is considered to be a form of private property, which everyone who watches my content knows. The family is the reproduction mechanism of capitalism via social reproduction theory because the family itself is to consider. Nope, wrong. Alex just keeps talking and now Alex is going in a timeout. Sorry, Alex, don't want to hear it anymore. Bye. We've got work to do. Go away.
Blocked by the crowd. ICE agents started driving vehicles on the curb around the protesters. There was simply not enough people or enough technical preparation to block or stop the cars at that time. The first arrest of the morning occurred around 6 a.m. when a van trying to leave the facility was once again blocked by standing and sitting protesters. This time, 6 Special Forces officers carrying pepper ball guns and a tear gas launcher rushed out of the gate. They grabbed the people on the ground and dragged them back. One woman was thrown violently against the ground, and another person was dragged across the asphalt by 2 agents before being grabbed and pulled through the gate into the facility. As the agents backed up into the gate, one fired several pepper balls at people in the driveway. The pattern of Special Response Team, SRT, agents storming out to escort an exiting or entering vehicle repeated throughout the morning.
So how Antifa is framing this is they're saying, we were the brave protesters standing out in front of the ICE facility. And when ICE tried to leave with kidnapped victims in their vans, we surrounded the vans and we didn't let them leave. And then the evil ICE agents came out and they hit us with pepper spray balls and they threw us to the ground and they arrested us. So Antifa's trying to do their level best to say, they're like saying, we're just standing around. I don't even know why you guys are upset. We're just blocking your vehicle. We aren't doing anything violent, but then they're saying, but the ICE agents attack them and bully them and shoot things at them and stuff like that. So they're doing everything they can to frame it in terms of like, ICE is the one inflicting violence on them when they're just standing there totally innocent, bro.
Friday afternoon, between 7 a.m. and midday, the vibes on both sides of the fence shifted. As more guards began to enter the facility with gear and buckets of munitions, distinct tendencies within the crowd became more evident. Some sections of the crowd sang, while others became more riled up after seeing protesters get repeatedly pepperballed and dragged inside.
See?
Still others helped families attempting to reach loved ones held inside the facility. The SRT agents tear gassed the crowd for the first time around midday during a standoff over exiting vans. The agents shot tear gas canisters and pepper balls into the crowd before dragging one man back into the facility with them. Few were prepared for the chemical munitions, and the crowd scattered across the street, while some helped.
The chemical munitions. This is something they did at the campus encampment too. When they were putting up like tent cities on college campuses, they kept telling people that the colleges were using chemical munitions on them. They were trying to say like they're literally poisoning us and stuff like that.
Few were prepared for the chemical munitions, and the crowd scattered across the street, while some helped wash eyes and move their worst-hit comrades to safety. In the afternoon, the crowd outside dwindled as people regrouped and waited for the second publicly announced demonstration. Federal agents grabbed a protester at Broadview during the afternoon.
See.
Friday evening, a second protest had been called for 7 p.m. Images of people being detained and tear gassed had spread across the media and galvanized many who had not yet been out to Broadview. On Friday evening, people rejoined the smaller crowd that remained from the day's protests. Throughout the evening, 2 or 3 agents remained on the roof of the facility, intermittently shooting pepper balls at protesters on the ground. As protesters amassed around 7 p.m., about 30 SRT agents gathered behind the gates. Protesters called for them to free the hundreds of people held captive inside, as well as the protesters arrested earlier that day.
Okay, I want to make sure everyone's reading comprehension is up to snuff. Protesters called for them to free the hundreds of people held captive inside the ICE facility. What are they referring to? Because remember, like Antifa is saying, they're kidnapping all these people. We have to rescue these people from being kidnapped. So when they're saying to their people, all we were doing was asking for the hundreds of people being held captive by these evil, violent mob. We're just asking for them to be freed. What are they saying? Yeah, this is like, I love this. This is like fanfic level. This is like fanfic coding. Yeah, held captive. They're talking about illegal immigrants that have been picked up by ICE and scheduled for deportation. That's what they're saying when they say free the hundreds of people held captive by the evil, militaristic organization that's enforcing capitalism upon all of us.
Protesters called for them to free the hundreds of people held captive inside, as well as the protesters arrested earlier that day. Following a daytime standoff with demonstrators by the gate of the facility, Gregory Bovino, who led the icy invasion of Los Angeles, moves in with agents and attempts to force the crowd back. After 7 p.m., SHIELD arrived. A dozen or so militants picked them up, but the majority of the crowd stayed at a distance, perhaps reflective of the previous week's tendency toward symbolic acts by a small number of people. There was a significant gap between the small group of people at the front and those observing at a distance, and no organic understanding of the need for people to participate behind the front line. The people in the SHIELD line began calling out and gesturing to the crowd, telling press to get out of the way and everyone else to pack in. Agents stormed out of the gates around 7:30 p.m. The frontliners in the SHIELD line repelled the first wave of munitions, facing down a barrage of tear gas, pepper balls, and flashbang grenades. But they were forced to retreat due to the combination of the agents' less lethal munitions and the disintegration of the crowd behind them. This was understandable. Not everyone has protective gear, and even those of us with gas masks felt the effects of the gas. Most of the crowd was not bracing each other or the SHIELD line. A SHIELD wall blocks riot munitions on the night of Friday, September 19th.
Hang on.
The front
I
line.
want to show you this picture. So, Antifa has homemade shields. They have zines and pamphlets that will teach people how to make their own homemade shields. And so you can see they're blocking the things that ICE is firing at them with their homemade shields.
The front line cannot be a specialized group that acts alone while others stand by documenting or witnessing. The specialization of relevant skills, from eyewashing to jail support, leaves militants isolated when pressure ramps up. A well-organized front line integrates offensive roles with the support necessary to sustain resistance and carry out objectives. But while the gulf between perceived militants at the front and folks at the back continues to impede effective defense, the growing tendency to resist points beyond it. We want to shut down Broadview, not just symbolically, but completely. The strategy is
Okay, so I want to make sure we emphasize this line because I've been accused lately by that communist that I got fired at Texas State University. I've been accused of taking things out of context and saying that when I say that communists want to overthrow the federal government, that they're just speaking theoretically. So communists, when they say they want to overthrow the federal government, when I catch them on video saying it, they say, I wasn't being literal. I was just speaking about socialist history and I was just speaking theoretically. Guys, do you think this is theoretical? We want to shut down Broadview, that is the immigration facility, not just symbolically, but completely. Are they being clear? This is not symbolic. This is not figurative. The attacks that Antifa is making on these ICE facilities are to shut them down because they are trying to overthrow this part of the government. They're doing this because they believe that ICE is the militant arm of the government that is enforcing capitalism by enforcing borders, because borders are a management effort of capitalism, because capitalism is private property ownership. How do you have private property? You have borders. The reason that Antifa are open borders is they don't believe borders should exist because they believe that borders enforce private property. They're being extremely clear about their intentions. This is not symbolic. This is not figurative.
We want to shut down Broadview, not just symbolically, but completely. The strategy of spectacle is based on the notion that the repeated brutalization of our comrades will persuade those who are abducting our neighbors to stop. But as people witness these kidnappings firsthand and experience the brutality of law enforcement, many are gradually abandoning that approach. Some for whom the violence of the state was previously an abstract concept are turning against the mercenaries that they see standing on the roof of Broadview, looking back at them through the scope of a weapon and choosing to pull the trigger. Crowd control.
Hang on, I want to read this again. I know we're stopping a lot, but there's just a lot to break down. We want to shut down Broadview, not just symbolically, but completely. The strategy of spectacle is based on the notion that the repeated brutalization of our comrades will persuade those who are abducting our neighbors to stop. But the people witness these kidnappings firsthand and experience the brutality of quote unquote law enforcement may gradually abandon that approach. So what they're saying is when people actually go to the ICE facilities and they see the brutality of the ICE officers and the kidnappings and all that stuff, they abandon a nonviolent approach in favor of a more aggressive one. Some for whom the violence of the state, that means the capitalist state, was previously an abstract concept, are turning against the mercenaries means ICE, that they see standing on the roof of Broadview, looking back at them through the scope of a weapon and choosing to pull the trigger. See there? Riot control.
Crowd control. The IC agents themselves proved brutal but unintelligent. Several times, they appeared lost, barreling into the crowd of demonstrators before pulling back just as quickly. Despite favorable conditions, they did not know how to kettle. When agents approached demonstrators, they often broke.
Kettle means, for people who don't know this word, despite favorable conditions, they don't know how to kettle. Kettle is essentially when law enforcement surround all the protesters, like they surround them in a way that they can't get out, and then they kind of close in on them and then they start arresting people. So what Antifa is saying is ICE officers at this facility are so stupid, they don't know how to do this basic kettling law enforcement procedure.
When agents approached demonstrators, they often broke ranks or formed a wall only one agent deep. Employing pepper ball guns, they shot sporadically and haphazardly, often without any specific target. Agents frequently broke in the face of demonstrators, appearing shaken even by feeble chants. Likewise, the SRT typically avoided close proximity with demonstrators, despite having a more significant advantage. Whether this was due to laziness, confusion, or both, they hesitated to detain even those who actively tried to stop vehicles from leaving the facility. This is only speculation, but it is worth remembering that the facility is relatively small, is used continuously, and holds roughly 150 prisoners at a time. In light of Operation Midway Blitz and other IC activity in and around Chicago, it is likely that the facility is already operating at its maximum capacity. This, along with their apparent lack of crowd control experience, may have informed how agents and SRDs engage with demonstrators. A flashbang grenade explodes as federal agents attack the shield wall, becoming proactive. If the courage we are seeing is to escape specialized and repetitious clashes with better equipped state forces, it will need to forego media spectacle to take more proactive efforts against deportation infrastructure. We need to define what it would mean to achieve victory over the state's agents and facilities, and articulate the fight for liberation that underlies the shift towards more generalized confrontation with the representatives of the state and capital.
Oh, what a sentence. What a sentence. We need to go back for this one. We need to define what it would mean to achieve victory over the state's agents, that means the police, the military, ICE, and facilities, jails, prisons, and articulate the fight for liberation. Liberation means to free oneself from capitalism, that underlies the shift towards more generalized confrontations with representatives of the state and capital. So just in case people think that I'm not correct when I say these are words for capitalism, they're telling you this is about capital, the state and capital. So Antifa believes that the United States is a capitalist country, that the United States Constitution is a capitalist document, and that's why you so often see them use the term state and capital kind of interchangeably, because they believe they can't overthrow capitalism without overthrowing the state, without throwing off the ICE agents and the police and all that stuff and the military, and abolishing the Constitution. Okay? That's what they believe. I saw a question. Have Antifa numbers grown, and by how much over the years? See, this is really difficult to say. And this is a project we're working on. We're working on trying to create a map of the modern left, but like it's so difficult. And the reason it's so difficult, and the reason that I don't think the Trump administration has a handle on this, is Antifa is completely decentralized. So it's not like there's no central reporting structure. There's none of that. But what I can say is the far left has been actively picking away at all of the disaffected Democrats and liberals ever since Trump won re-election. And so I think Antifa's numbers have only ballooned in the past year. That just makes sense to me. But can I tell you specifically how much? I have no idea. And guess what? No one else has any idea either. And that's part of the scary thing. When you have a highly decentralized movement, it's almost impossible to be able to track and have any estimate for how many people are in it. Fun times are ahead, guys. Fun times are ahead.
We need to define what it would mean to achieve victory over the state's agents and facilities and articulate the fight for liberation that underlies the shift towards more generalized confrontation with the representatives of the state and capital. Acting on that scale requires expanding beyond a specialized activist crowd, not to mention less laudable, more plainly careerist aspiring politicians, to build relationships with those who live around the facility and, more broadly, with everyone whose instinct is already to protect people from ICE. All over the country, people have spontaneously taken clever and timely actions against raids in their neighborhoods, acting before specialized activists and NGOs arrived to urge them to limit themselves to documenting and witnessing, rather than...
Okay, I want to make sure I emphasize this. All over the country, people have spontaneously taken clever and timely actions against raids in their neighborhood. They're talking about all these neighborhood groups that are popping up and having these signal chats where they're basically telling each other when ICE is around and trying to protect their neighbors from being deported. Acting before specialized activists and NGOs arrive to urge them to limit themselves to documenting and witnessing. Antifa is telling you they don't like NGOs. Okay? Antifa is telling you that NGOs, when NGOs get involved in these situations, they make the people involved less militant. Antifa wants people in these community groups attacking ICE. They want people in these community groups causing problems. Antifa is not okay. Who wants to answer this question? Because I've only answered it about 15,000 times in the last week. And I promise you, they're not funded by NGOs, because Antifa in this article is saying when NGOs arrive, everyone becomes de-radicalized. And I have other articles by Antifa where they are telling you they do not like NGOs. Antifa is funded by mutual aid. They're funded by mutual aid, mutual aid, mutual aid, mutual aid, mutual aid. They are not funded by Soros. They are not funded by USAID. They are not funded by NGOs. Antifa is funded by mutual aid. NGOs scuff their plans. NGOs de-radicalize. NGOs prevent them from doing the things that they want to do. People, and this is another thing the Trump administration doesn't understand, guys. There is no funding that can be cut off. There's no big funding in these groups. And a lot of what Antifa does, it's not expensive. They're very scrappy. They might print stuff off on paper, but like what they're doing isn't expensive. Mutual aid means small donations. Small donations of cash, small donations of supplies. There is no, conservatives. I have what? I have 630 people listening on YouTube right now. God knows how many other people are listening to me on other platforms. Conservatives, I need you to listen to me like you have never listened before in your fucking lives. Antifa does not have any big money backers. This is provably false. There is no big money that you can cut off. There is nothing. I have former Antifa that are on my channel. I don't know if any of the former Antifa are here today. If you are, speak up. But I have former Antifa people in my community. They will be the very first to tell you they don't have any funding. This is all mutual aid. It's voluntary donations. Most of what Antifa does is not expensive. Most of what Antifa does just takes time. It takes time and energy and focus, but it doesn't take money. And so that is why, if you think Antifa is busing people places, you are listening to conservative influencers who lie to you. Who is busing people places is the Party for Socialism and Liberation. The Party for Socialism and Liberation is not Antifa. These are completely separate groups. Stop fucking listening to Laura fucking Loomer. Laura Loomer is great with some research. Laura Loomer has completely lied to her audience on this point. Every single time someone thinks that Antifa's busing someone, I promise you it's because they heard it from Laura fucking Loomer. They are not Antifa. The Party for Socialism and Liberation is a completely different thing. They are funded in a completely different way. But Antifa doesn't even like the... Hang on. Pause. Hang on. I'm going to prove to you guys right now that Antifa does not like the Party for Socialism and Liberation, okay? I'm on Crime Think's website. I need to scroll down a little bit. I'm looking for something very specific. I am on Crime Think's website. We are going to go back to not this, this article right here. Hang on. Average person, this is why conservative influencers are our biggest obstacle in fighting the far left. Exactly. So I want everyone to go to this article. We're going to go back to the other one in a second. But I want to show you something in this article. And I'm just going to look it up. Find Party for... Here it is. On the evening of Monday, June 9th, over 600 protesters gathered at a Texas capitol for a march announced by the Party for Socialism and Liberation. A revolutionary organization called for a parallel demonstration, but at a time set, blah, 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 blah. In this article, hang on, the PSL rally, the PSL is the Party for Socialism and Liberation, began marching tailed by a police motorcycle escort and reached the ICE facility by 7:45 p.m. The group were energetic and huge. A huge crowd chanted outside the facility, blah, blah, blah. Drummers beat a rhythm to the sound, breaking windows. Some people dragged scooters into the streets. Others painted pro-immigration and anti-ICE slogans and threw balloons with paint. All the while, the red-shirted PSL were urging the crowd to keep moving. They're telling you Antifa showed up in Austin and we were doing all this violent shit and we were breaking stuff and we were vandalizing things. And the Party for Socialism and Liberation were trying to get us to stop. They're telling you these are two completely different groups. Antifa wanted to vandalize shit and break shit, and the Party for Socialism and Liberation was like, no, guys, no, we can't do that, because they're two different groups, okay? Dozens of people pushed back, chanting, ICE is right there. Nonetheless, by 8 p.m., the PSL organizers had mobilized most of the crowd back towards the Capitol, successfully convincing the participants to tell others that moving would keep the group safe. A splinter group of about 100 stayed behind and continued to express their feelings with art and music. The march was effectively split between those who were acting on their own initiative and those who were submitting to the authority of the PSL. They do not like the PSL. That's not all. PSL shepherded the larger group back towards the Capitol to an intersection with nothing but high fences, mounted cops, and streets blockaded by police. PSL organizers got on the microphone to formally disband the march. They thanked everyone for coming and encouraged them to go home and rest up to do it again later. The crowd grew uncertain, largely returning to the sidewalk in front of the fenced-off Capitol and very nearly conceding to the street to the police, with a few insistent spirits who remained at the intersection. And there's one more thing I want to find in this. Paid. Maybe it's not in this. I've definitely seen an article, and I'll have to go back and find it. I don't remember which one it was, In addition to this, I've also seen an article where Antifa overtly called the Party for Socialism and Liberation the paid protesters. Okay? It was around the same time as this article. I don't remember exactly the ones. Maybe it was here. Let me just do a search in here. Hang on. Paid. Here it is. Look at this. Here it is. Look at this. So this is an article about the Los Angeles riots. This is called Los Angeles Stands Up to ICE. People started amassing at the Metropolitan Detention Center. A press conference took place involving Union del Barrio, the SEIU, the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights of Los Angeles. Peace policing caused fights between the paid activists and the crowd. They're calling, the PSL is also mentioned in this article. They're calling the PSL, Antifa is calling the PSL the paid activists or the paid protesters, because the PSL, the Party for Socialism and Liberation, is legitimately funded by the CCP. Antifa completely rejects the CCP. They completely reject that money. And so going back to the chat we saw earlier, asking about the busing, if Antifa doesn't have money, how are they busing people in? The answer is they're not. The Party for Socialism and Liberation is busing people in because the Party for Socialism and Liberation has CCP money. Antifa doesn't like that, and Antifa calls them the paid protesters or the paid activists. It is a contradiction of Antifa's ideology to take in money in that way. And these people are very serious. Antifa does not sell out for money, guys. They just don't. They are, what is the word? They're cult members. They're cult members. And so I want people to understand the PSL is not Antifa. Antifa is not the PSL. And every single time Laura fucking Loomer confuses this, more people don't know what's going on. Okay? And by the way, Trump is not going to be able to say that the PSL is a terrorist organization. You want to know why? Because the PSL is going to fight that in court and they're going to win, because the PSL doesn't involve themselves in any of this. The PSL tries to keep things, basically, the PSL cares about optics. The PSL doesn't want to be violent. The PSL just wants to go out and have these big protests and have their signs and all that, so they keep getting their funding. But like, they're not committing acts of violence. They're not committing acts of vandalism. Antifa is not the PSL. The PSL is not Antifa. Is everyone clear on this? Everyone good? Okay. Let's go back. Sorry for that aside, but I do think that that is a really important distinction for people to make, because if we don't know what group we're talking about, we don't know what behaviors we can expect them to take. Okay? Ideologue. Yes, thank you. Someone said it. Ideologue is the word that I'm looking for. Exactly. Exactly.
Rather than relying on all over the country, people have spontaneously taken clever and timely actions against raids in their neighborhoods, acting before specialized activists and NGOs arrived to urge them to limit themselves to documenting and witnessing. Rather than relying on reactive rapid response networks that rarely arrive in time, given the speed of raids, more proactive action could involve targeting choke points around local deportation pathways like Broadview, or as in Los Angeles, setting up community defense centers at hotspots of federal activity. Any effective anti-IC strategy would depend on the actions of locals who choose to intervene in their neighborhoods. Though the media has downplayed many of these stories, the clashes at Broadview are only possible because of the courage of those who have chased IC out of their neighborhoods in Los Angeles, Chicago, and elsewhere around the country.
Yeah, so Bear Boy in the chat says, I wouldn't be surprised if Trump ends up accusing the PSL of being Antifa. I promise you that's what's gonna happen. I'm putting my stake in the ground right now. I am predicting that Trump, because they know that the PSL is funded by the CCP and they don't like that. This is like, the PSL is the only organization where they actually understand the funding source. I promise you, Trump is going to say that the PSL are a terrorist organization because they're Antifa, and then the PSL is going to sue them, and the PSL is going to get the ACLU on their side, and the PSL is going to win in court because the PSL is not Antifa. So frustrating. So frustrating. And again, it's obvious. If you actually listen to the left and you actually watch leftist protests and you actually pay attention to all these leftist groups, I've been tracking the PSL since 2022. It's like the PSL is completely distinct from Antifa. They are not remotely the same thing. And if you actually look at the information, it's so clear. But the Trump administration isn't actually looking at the information. They're listening to social media bullshit. It's so frustrating.
Though the media has downplayed many of these stories, the clashes at Broadview are only possible because of the courage of those who have chased IC out of their neighborhoods in Los Angeles, Chicago, and elsewhere around the country. After the shield wall scatters, the remaining protesters move forward to meet agents at the gate. We also need rapid tactical development. Given the Chicago
Hang on. We got a super chat from Meta Guide. Thank you. I was once a stupid conservative, and then Dr. Karlyn Borysenko cured me of my affliction by beating me back to my senses with knowledge. I love that so much. Yeah, I'll beat all of you in the head. I will beat all of you in the head with knowledge until you get it. Thank you.
Given the Chicago Police Department's reliance on kettling, collaborated with organizers, and when they so choose, batons, Chicagoans are less equipped to deal with tear gas than people in Los Angeles were. This is changing quickly, but it has taken some serious learning. We've seen increasing tactical openness. During the first phase of anti-IC struggles, hard and soft barricades were used to block the loading docks of a downtown immigration court, delaying deportations there by years at a time. During the struggles at Broadview, de-arresting has become the norm. Shields have become more widely accepted. The use of protective gear like respirators and goggles has become common, and protesters are beginning to return tear gas canisters to IC agents. These developments are not necessarily connected to any particular political commitments. We still see people who are willing to hold off agents and block vehicles, yet also quixotically call the police to report IC activity. NGOs and recruitment drive organizations. Emerging autonomous activity to stop deportation shows.
So I just want to note here, we're going to get a really direct answer about what Antifa thinks about NGOs right now.
NGOs and recruitment drive organizations. Emerging autonomous activity to stop deportation shows the potential of stepping outside of recruitment-based organizations' long marches to nowhere, and NGOs' emphasis on legal support after deportation arrests have already occurred.
So when they're saying NGOs, now, this is actually kind of a legit form of attack that the Trump administration could do. There are organizations that provide legal support to Antifa after they're arrested. Okay? So Antifa, I said this on Fox News, Antifa trains to get arrested. They also train in de-arrest. I actually have a whole de-arrest zine that I'm going to put on the internet at some point where they're teaching this stuff. They train them on how to get arrested. They provide them with bail. They provide them with lawyers. The bail often comes from mutual aid, but the lawyers come from places like the National Lawyers Guild. That's not the only organization they get lawyers from, but that is one of the organizations. The National Lawyers Guild is an NGO. So that's what they're saying here. The activity is due in large part to, the NGO's emphasis on legal support after deportation and arrests have already occurred. So that is a very strategic line of attack the Trump administration can make in terms of like shutting down. And I don't know where the funding is coming from that, to be really honest. The NGOs are a different group than what Antifa usually does, but Antifa does use them when it comes to like getting access to like free lawyers and stuff like that. And so the Trump administration could absolutely go after organizations like the National Lawyers Guild, find out where their funding is coming from, cutting that off. But I really want to make sure people understand this. Just because you cut off the funding for the National Lawyers Guild or groups like that does not mean that Antifa is going to stop. It does not mean that you have actually cut off Antifa's funding source. What you have done is you've kind of like thrown sand in their gears and you've taken their lawyers away from them. But you have to understand, Antifa is not afraid of being arrested. Antifa is not afraid of sacrificing themselves for their cause. They are still going to go do this. They are still going to attack ICE facilities. They're still going to get arrested. They're still going to vandalize things. They're still going to slash ICE tires. They're still going to do all the things they're doing now. They're just going to have to figure out another way to get legal support. Now, does that mean you shouldn't do it? No, of course. Trump should absolutely cut off any funding sources to these lawyers as he possibly can, 100%. But I really want to make sure people understand that just because you take this away does not mean Antifa is going to stop.
Emerging autonomous activity to stop deportation shows the potential of stepping outside of recruitment-based organizations' long marches to nowhere, and NGOs' emphasis on legal support after deportation arrests have already occurred. This activity has grown in large part due to the NGOs abandoning key locations and struggles. The Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights and Organized Communities Against Deportations, the two main nonprofits that dominate organizing against deportations in Chicago,
different
did
org.
not take action against the repeated deportations at immigration court earlier in summer 2025, while autonomous groups stepped in to barricade the loading docks, coordinate phone zaps, heckle management, flyer other occupants of the building, and conduct court support for people with hearings inside.
Okay, so now Antifa is talking about other organizations. They're saying, listen, the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights and Organized Communities Against Deportations, these are two nonprofits that Antifa is saying, where the hell were you guys? Antifa is basically saying, we've got these NGOs that aren't actually really involved in the same struggle that we're involved in, and they weren't actually even showing up. They're saying these NGOs did not take action against repeated deportations at immigration court earlier this summer. They're basically saying, like, these are not organizations we can rely on.
Those actions shut down the court on multiple occasions, pushing hearings back years, and ultimately forced the building management to revoke ICE's access to their loading docks, putting a stop to kidnappings at that location. This would not have occurred had autonomous demonstrators not blocked the flow of commerce into and out of the building.
Autonomous demonstrators means Antifa.
This would not have occurred had autonomous demonstrators not blocked the flow of commerce into and out of the building. Beyond calls and petitions, the NGOs similarly abdicated actions around Broadview.
See?
That was one of the factors that enabled the actions of the preceding weeks to take place. An umbrella serves as a makeshift defense during the clashes. Internal tensions. When people first mobilized against the Broadview facility a few weeks ago, it had hardly received any public attention. So some people focused on press strategy. This has caused tensions, from social media influencers issuing dispersal advice to swarms of press preventing de-arrests and isolating those who attempt to protect activists targeted for arrest. Those who have involved press and public opinion in their activity, the most have ended up letting that attention hinder their approach to strategy. While it is clear that we have to consider press and public attention in our movements, we should never compromise this moment's most promising goal, driving IC out of everywhere.
Okay, I want to read this again just so people are clear. These are ideologues. While it is clear that we have to consider press and public attention in our movements, we should never compromise on this moment's most promising goal, driving ICE out of everywhere. Again, this is their stated goal, not just in Chicago, in every location, in Los Angeles, in Portland, in Seattle, in New York, every location where they are protesting ICE facilities, they don't, yes, exactly. They're like, we maybe should consider the optics of this, but we are not compromising our values. We want to get rid of ICE everywhere. They're very, very clear. Only literal retards agree with you, Nicholas, so please listen to what you're being shown right now because you don't know what you're talking about and we will teach you, but if you mouth off in my chat again, I'm going to put you in a timeout to prevent you from being disruptive, okay?
While it is clear that we have to consider press and public attention in our movements, we should never compromise this moment's most promising goal, driving IC out of everywhere. While demonstrators have proved that they can build critical mass, they have sometimes limited their own effectiveness. In the weeks leading up to September 19th, messaging around the efforts to shut down Broadview was taken up by a range of people and organizations who, presuming they knew best, used notions like safety and visibility to discipline demonstrators to their own benefit. The assumption that the only imaginable goal of these protests is to speak truth to power rather than shutting down Broadview left people unprepared for the confrontations that ensued. On the night of September 19th, when shut it down meant taking serious risks, this meant that there was no second line to back up the shield wall. Without backing, the front line could not hold, and this gave the SRT units a chance to hunt down scattered demonstrators. Nonetheless, thanks to consistent protests and media coverage, people in the neighboring areas have begun to turn out. Without funding or support from any big-name organization or coalition, the fight to shut down Broadview depends on the courage of ordinary people.
Okay, we're going to read this again so people can be very clear about this. As a reminder, this is Antifa's publishing arm. This is Antifa publishing information so it gets distributed to all of the thousands of decentralized cells all over the country. So this is treat this like an internal document. Antifa is not used to people like us reading these documents. Leftists are deeply perturbed that I read their documents and I go to their events because they are so not used to people that are not other leftists reading their documents and going to their events that they don't know how to handle it. And so you have to treat this as they are talking to each other. And I've been behind closed doors in like their private meetings. This is exactly how they talk to each other. They're not talking to people like us. They're articulating information, okay? Nevertheless, thanks to the consistent protests and media coverage, people in the neighboring areas have begun to turn out. Without funding or support from any big-name organization or coalition, the fight to shut down Broadview depends on the courage of ordinary people. This is not code, guys. This is not secret trickery. This is Antifa telling you we do not have any funding. We do not have any support. We don't have big name organizations or coalitions that are doing this. We are doing this because normal people are showing up and we are using them to try to shut down this ICE facility. But we are not doing this because we're paid. We're not doing this because we have some big funding source that can be cut off by the government. We're doing this in spite of not having that funding and not having that support at all. Does everyone understand? Bro, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I have been in their meetings. You have been sitting your ass on your couch watching sports. I have been infiltrating these people for 4 fucking years. How many of their private events have you gone to? I'm going to bet it's none. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Please shut up. Does everyone see? The funding that you think is coming from Soros is not there. The funding that you think is coming from USAID or Barack Obama or Act Blue or anything related to the Democrat Party is not there. Okay, you just got put in a timeout. You can sit in the back of the class and shut the fuck up. I live in Portland. I know everything. How much do you want to bet that dude has never been down to the ICE facility in Portland? Bro, I know people who are covering the ICE facility in Portland. I'll bet you all the money in my bank account that dude who claims he's in Portland has never gone any fuck off near the ICE facility. Yeah, average person lives in Seattle and average person has actually gone undercover with these groups. I live in Portland, Pinkley swear. Trust me, bro. Anyway, let's listen again.
Without funding or support from any big-name organization or coalition, the fight to shut down Broadview depends on the courage of ordinary people. A protester's umbrella shows the effects of pepper ball rounds. The shutdown fiasco. As this piece was being composed, a series of leaks from the Department of Homeland Security suggested that the Broadview Processing Center was being temporarily shut down. Something similar had taken place earlier at the Delaney Hall Detention Center in New Jersey after protesters blocked and eventually breached it, though that site had come back into operation with better security a few months later. However, following a public meltdown featuring a DHS assistant secretary and eager claims of victory by organizations that had not been particularly visible on the ground, it was officially confirmed that the Broadview Processing Center would remain open as of the morning of September 23rd. The processing center has been blocked off by tall metal fences, presumably to impede protesters' access to its entry and exit gate, and clashes continue outside. The buses we have seen exiting the facility to drive to the Gary Chicago International Airport were transporting detainees who have been forced to sign self-removal papers. On the one hand, we've been aware for some time that
I love this. I love this. The buses we have seen exiting the facility to drive to the Gary Chicago International Airport were transporting detainees who had been forced to sign self-removal papers. The detainees were kidnapped by the evil aggressors and forced to sign papers on their removal. Okay. Okay.
On the one hand, we've been aware for some time that the processing center was at capacity. It is a relatively small building with limited bed space. This makes it a point of vulnerability for the entire deportation apparatus in Illinois and its adjoining states. On the other hand, the confusing sequence of events that ended with the center remaining open suggests internal disarray. This matches the reports we've heard from inside the facility itself that many of the mercenaries involved are working together for the first time, often at cross purposes.
Look, they're calling ICE agents mercenaries. They are. I've definitely heard the far left making a big deal about like all the new people that ICE is hiring. And you've seen this throughout this document. I think this might be an underrated thing that maybe we should just spend a moment on. Antifa is highly aware that many people going to work for ICE lack experience. They've talked about it throughout this document. They said ICE people are so stupid. They don't even know what they're doing. They don't even know how to kettle us. They're stepping out of line. They're talking to us separately. They're flat out telling you that they are hyper aware that there are a lot of inexperienced ICE agents and that they are trying to figure out how do we take advantage of their inexperience to cause more problems. And they're calling them mercenaries, which is just kind of funny.
This matches the reports we've heard from inside the facility itself that many of the mercenaries involved are working together for the first time, often at cross purposes. It's possible that at one level of the IC and DHS bureaucracy, the decision was made to avoid a Delaney Hall type situation and improve security, but higher up leadership balked at the suggestion and insisted that the facility remain in use. In any case, it is clear that on some level, what we are doing is working. It is creating stressful and chaotic situations for our enemies, leading to internal conflict. The thresh.
What we are doing is working, and that's in bold, so you know they're really excited about that. What we're doing is creating stressful and chaotic situations for our enemies.
In any case, it is clear that on some level, what we are doing is working. It is creating stressful and chaotic situations for our enemies, leading to internal conflict. The threshold of effort necessary for success may be lower than we thought, and our enemies more fearful than we anticipated. At the same time, the sluggish and inept federal bureaucracy routinely experiences internal conflicts of this sort, and we should seek to take advantage of them.
Look how strategic they're being. I cannot emphasize this enough, guys. This is why I always reprimand people who say, these people are mentally ill, these people are stupid, these people are lazy. They're not mentally ill people don't write like this. They don't think like this. Lazy people don't think like this. Stupid people don't think like this. Listen again. In any case, it is clear on some level that what we're doing is working. It is creating stressful and chaotic situations for our enemies, leading to internal conflict. The threshold of effort necessary for success may be lower than we thought, and our enemies more fearful than we anticipated. So they're actually saying, guys, we're being like way more effective at stopping these deportations than we ever thought we would be. They're like actually surprised at how much success they're having against the Trump administration in stopping these deportations. They're like, listen, this might even be even easier than we ever thought it could be. At the same time, the sluggish and inept federal bureaucracy routinely experiences internal conflicts of this sort, and we should seek to take advantage of them. ICE out of everywhere. And that's the end of that article. That's the end of that article. And again, the name of this article is ICE Out of Everywhere, ICE Out of Everywhere, a report from the blockades of the Broadview facility. This was published on Antifa's publishing website, which is CrimeThink, on September 23rd, 2025, yesterday, as of the time of this recording of this video. And this is a direct report of what Antifa is seeing on the ground, that they are communicating to Antifa cells all over the country. I just want to address this. My point is, she should be advising the Trump administration. The Trump administration is welcome to ask me. I'm not going to shill myself out for the Trump administration. The Trump administration is very well aware of my existence. I know that. I know people in the Trump administration. They know who I am. They are welcome to come and ask me. Like, I can't do anything if the Trump administration doesn't want to ask me.